That is one of my favorite songs. The reason I like it is because it really kind of speaks to our relationship with God and quite frankly our relationship with sin or brokenness or however you want to say that. It reminds me of a story. It's a young gal, call her Betty, and she was excited. Her school was one, in their homeroom on a certain day they had kind of an open kind of sharing, what was happening and whatnot, and she could not wait to share. So she got to school and it was homeroom time. It was that day to share, and she raised her hand and she enthusiastically announced to everyone that on Wednesday night youth group she got saved. And the teacher was wondering, well, what were you before? And she said, well, I was a sinner. And the teacher went, okay, what are you now? She says, well, I'm a sinner. And the teacher was a little perplexed, and she says, what's the difference? And Betty said, well, before I was a sinner running towards sin. Now I'm a sinner running away from sin. And to me, that just encapsulates, I think a lot of times, and it's our fault. Those outside looking in think we see everybody else as sinners, and that when we come to Jesus, we no longer are sinners. And anyone who's ever sat here for any length of time knows that ain't true, right? And as a matter of fact, a lot of people come thinking that's true, and then they look around and they go, wow, these people are just like me. They're a bunch of hypocrites. And there is some hypocrisy. Won't say there's not. But a lot of times it's just they misunderstand. They think that somewhere along the lines, we get, by committing to Christ, everything just stops, but it doesn't. Because, well, we're human. is the reason why. And so we're looking at the scriptures and trying to find where we get the power to change. And we find ourselves on a unique role. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily come to church and think that we would talk about the 12 steps. And it's probably because for most folks, the recovery program, they don't understand its history. They don't understand how it came about. But the 12 steps were developed by a couple guys that were raging alcoholics. There was no hope for either one of them. And they found hope in a Bible study called the Oxford Group. And from this Bible study and their own experience, they developed 12 principles, if you would, that help them not just recover, but help them to live. And these 12 principles have been used for people all over the world, internationally, poor, rich, male, female, it doesn't matter, to address serious issues of powerlessness in their lives, of areas that needed to be changed. And so we're going back to God's Word, and we're kind of taking a close look at that. We've done, we've looked at steps 1 through 5. I'll just remind you, last week, 4 was, did a real searching inventory. This is being honest with ourselves, that we need help, that we are powerless, and this is why. And then 5 was admitting to one person that it's confessing, saying this is it. But this step kind of goes beyond that. It says it's more than just that. So let me just start out with a passage, 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 9. This is the second letter that Paul has written to them. Actually, he's probably written more than that, but the second one that we have recorded in God's Word. And the first letter, he kind of scorned them on several things. One of them being there was somebody amongst them that was doing something that even the world would say, ugh. And they were like, well, grace. We'll just use grace. We won't say anything. We won't do anything. And Paul wrote and said, no. If you got someone who's a follower of Jesus, you need to confront it and not just live with it. And so, especially since it wasn't like they're struggling with it, it wasn't they were repentant, they were just openly involved in this. And so he was pretty harsh with them. And he sends Titus later on to see how they did, and they had changed. They reacted to his letter, and then he writes this. He says, "Yet now I'm happy, not because you were made sorry," he's talking about his letter, "but because your sorrow led you to repentance." What he's saying is I'm thrilled, and I'm thrilled not because I shamed you, not because you feel really, really bad. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we get stuck with that, right? My wife and I, probably more I than her, but I like to include her so I don't feel so bad. Sometimes we get involved in situations with our kids, and we think we're correcting them, but the truth is we just want them to feel really, really bad that they, once again, they broke something, they messed something up. And so sometimes it's hard to divide that. But what Paul's saying is this: my goal isn't to make you feel shame. My goal is that you would lead you to repentance. And this word repentance is literally means to change one's mind. Some of you might have heard it's 180 degree, you're heading this way, and then you turn 180 degrees to go the other way. Repentant people take a deep look inside and they face the truth about themselves, how they've been excusing their sins, and how they've been hurting others. And then they come to a decision point. It's a decision point in which they change their mind from pleasing self to pleasing God. That is what true repentance is. But it starts with a decision that I'm going to face this, and a decision that I'm going to change. And in essence, that is what we're going to talk about today. That is what these principles lead us to, and that's what God's word leads us to. So one of the main principles is step 6. We're actually going to do 2 steps today, steps 6 and 7, but we'll start with 6. Step 6 says we were entirely ready. Now, remember the context here. We looked at our lives, whether it's been, we've never done this, and so it was a huge inventory from beginning till now, or whether it's just the daily one or the weekly one, whatever it is. You looked at a season of your life, you got clear on what it is where you've fallen short. You have confessed that to yourself, to God, and to another person. So it's out in the open. But it doesn't stay there. It doesn't stay there. Now there's got to be a willingness and then an action. So here's the willingness. The willingness is we are entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Now, the reason this is important is because there is a difference between acknowledging I've done wrong and saying I'm sorry that I have done wrong, and really deciding you don't want to do wrong. Because half the time when we apologize, we're not actually saying I'm sorry that I did whatever action that was. What we're really saying is I'm sorry I got caught and you feel bad about it. I'm sorry that you feel bad. But the truth is, this little thing, this thing I look at the computer, these things that I read, the power that I feel when I speak to people that way, or whatever the thing, the cheating on my text, whatever it may be, we kind of like. Kind of feeds something in us. And so a lot of us just stop at saying, I acknowledge it before you, I did wrong. Of course, most of us only do that when we got caught anyhow, so what else are you going to do, right? So you say, I'm sorry. But the next step is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Now, I got to spend just a small time here talking about entirely ready, because that's a pretty high standard. So this is what the big book says, the AA big book. So we're looking at all kinds of different resources, including God's word. The big book says this. It says, we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove us from all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing, right? So there's you need to be willing, but I'm not, so ask him to help you be willing, right? At the core of this, we cannot remove character defects without God. As a matter of fact, sometimes we can't even be willing to remove character defects without God. I think that's the thing that, quite frankly, those of us who grew up in the church, we miss. We miss this. We just think, okay, if I acknowledge in my head that this is true, that I'm a sinner and that I'm supposed to live this way, then I just do that. And then what we do is we begin to play games with ourselves. And here's the game. We know we're just as bad as our neighbor, deep down. But we cover up that feeling. We cover up the fact that we love our little sins, just like the next guy, by going, I go to church. I read my Bible. I know these, I memorize verses. We put all this, I do good stuff, biblical stuff, but it still covers up the fact that there are parts of our lives we don't want God to mess with. And we supposedly have been following him a long time. And part of it is because we feel shame that I don't want to give it up. And no one has ever stand in front of you. So now I'm standing up in front of you going, okay, guess what? Christians sometimes don't want to give stuff up. People who follow Jesus sometimes go, I don't mind doing this and that, but I ain't doing that one. So you got to give that. You got to acknowledge that and give that over to him. And let him do that in you, which you cannot do yourself. We must be willing to behave differently from the way we have in the past. We must be willing to be changed. And I would really look at that, because if you keep running into the same wall over and over and over and over again, I would challenge you whether or not you're really willing. Even though you're like, yeah, God, I wish I could just flip a switch and this thing would be gone, right? But I would look below that and go, am I truly willing to give this up? The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions points out kind of our thinking about this, we'd be entirely ready. It says this, many will at once ask, how can we accept the entire implications of step 6? Why? That is perfection. This sounds like a hard question, but practically speaking, it isn't. Notice this, only step 1, where we made the 100% admission we were powerless over alcohol or whatever it is in our lives. Really, the issue is self. We're powerless over self. Can be practiced with absolute perfection. Did you see that? It says everything else here is a process. The one thing that we need to do pretty much perfect is understand we can't do it. The remaining 11 steps state perfect, what he says, ideals. It's something that we're striving for. It's something that's on the horizon. It can't be done perfectly. And so the idea of being entirely willing is an ideal. It's something I'm striving to be entirely willing. Not just on these things that absolutely destroy my life, I have to get rid of, but even the medium things and the little things that, quite frankly, I can live with. We'll talk about this later. While we can't practice this step perfectly, we can practice it with courage and discipline. Here's another quote. We shall need to raise our eyes toward perfection and be ready to walk, notice this, in that direction. That's what the founders of the program wrote. It will seldom matter how haltingly we walk. The only question will be, are we ready? Are you ready to change? And now, not change, not just are you ready to acknowledge that you've damaged other people and you wish that damage wasn't there, but are you ready to change? So let's talk a little bit about this challenge of step 6, okay? Because they're right in the middle of this. It's one thing to say, okay, God, remove these defects of character. Here I acknowledge that I'm missing the mark here, but remove these defects of character. But it's another thing altogether to kind of lay it all out. So let me give you an example. When in my early years, I grew up in a Methodist church, and United Methodist Church, and a good church preached Jesus. It was a little bit more traditional than this. We had pews. You'll like this part. Messages were no more than 20 minutes. So sorry about that. But we all wore suits. The guys often wore suits. Gals' dresses, and the pastor a long, beautiful, flowing robe. And so you'd wear a suit, and of course you'd go out afterwards sometimes after church. Well, a lot of times this is what would happen. Somebody, a like in the college group, this happened all the time. You go to church, and then all of a sudden, folks are like, hey, let's go to so-and-so and do this. And everybody would go, and all the guys would start taking off their suit jackets because it's uncomfortable, okay? It's just plumb uncomfortable. At least for me it was. But occasionally there'd be one or two guys that would not take off their suit jacket, and they try to play it cool. But see, this is what we knew about those who didn't take off their jackets. They had ironed the sleeves and the collars, because that's what everyone was going to see. And their shirts were all wrinkly and a mess, and they didn't want the girls to see. So they didn't take off their suit jacket because then everyone knew what a slob they were. Of course, you realize I'm talking about them. I'm not admitting that it was me. Actually, it wasn't me because my mother wouldn't let me go out that way. But that's besides the point. And for a lot of us, that's how it is with the brokenness in our lives, the sin in our lives, right? We spend a lot of effort and time addressing those things that everyone can see. But whatever's kind of beneath the surface, a lot of times we just leave it unattended. And if we know ahead of time that we're going to have to take off the jacket, then that day we'll iron. That week we'll kind of take, we have a group that's going to talk about a certain subject. So that week, I won't do such and such, or I'll try really hard. So I can speak honestly, but that's not reality. That's not reality. And that's the challenge of step 6. Again, the 12 steps, the 12 traditions. And the reason I go to this resource is because these guys had a lot of experience with real people. And they had a lot of experience with what was really going on. I mean, people were honest. And they saw honest people, some get changed lives and some not. And they're speaking from experience. And I just want you to hear from experience. So this is what they say. It says, practically everybody wishes to be rid of most of their glaring and destructive handicaps. It's kind of like, duh. No one wants to be so proud that he's scorned as a braggart, nor so greedy that he's labeled a thief. No one wants to be angry enough to murder, lustful enough to rape, gluttonous enough to ruin his health. No one wants to be agonized by the chronic pain of envy or be paralyzed by sloth. Of course, most human beings don't suffer these defects at these rock bottom levels. In other words, most of us, and this is pretty much true in the Bay Area especially, in the Western culture, we live just below these extremes, right? We make sure our collars and our cuffs are good. But there's a problem. He says this, it goes on and says this, there's always a sticking point, a point at which we say, no, I can't give this up yet. This is what they realize. There's a point where people are like, my raging alcoholism, you got it. But the rest of me, I just came to the program to lose weight. I just came to the program to stop drinking. I just came to the program to manage my anger so I don't hit someone. Leave the other stuff alone. And then they get step 6. And we shall often tread on even more dangerous ground when we cry, this I will never give up. Such is the power of our instincts to overreach themselves. No matter how far we have progressed, desires will always be found which oppose the grace of God. Let me read that last sentence again. No matter how far we have progressed, how many years of church we have been to, how many years of Bible study fellowship that we've attended, sermons that we have taught, desires will always be found which oppose the grace of God. We're sinners trying to run away from sin. You don't stop being a sinner. The fact is, we delight in our defects. Let's just be honest. We delight in our defects. And when I say we, I'm not talking about humanity in general right now. I'm talking about Christians in this room. We delight in our defects. We like to feel just a little superior to the next person. We enjoy that. We let greed masquerade as ambition, just trying to provide for my family. We speak of love, and we may believe it when we say it, but really we're hiding lust in the dark corners of our mind. Many of us, though, stay within conventional boundaries. We have to admit that our imaginary sex lives are dressed up as dreams of romance, but they really have nothing to do with romance. They have nothing to do with two people serving and loving each other. It's about us. It's about our lust. Gossip borrowed with anger has its satisfaction for us. Often we are not trying to help those we criticize. We're just trying to proclaim our own righteousness. Oh my goodness, church, are we guilty of this? We live in a world riddled with envy. It is the premium ideal, if you would, in the Bay Area. To a greater or less degree, everybody is infected with envy. From this defect, we must surely get a warped yet definite sense of satisfaction. Else, why would we consume, listen to this, such great amounts of time wishing for what we have not, rather than working for it, or angrily looking for attributes we shall never have, instead of adjusting to the fact and accepting it? It's always about what we don't have. It's always about what we don't have. Who's got more? Again, the 12 Steps of 12 Traditions says this: therefore, it seems plain that a few of us can quickly or easily become ready to aim at spiritual and moral perfection. We want to settle for only as much perfection as will get us by in life. Let me put this another way. We want to settle for only or as much of Jesus as will get us by in life. Underline that, and I dare you to spend some time this week reflecting on that. I challenge you. But rather than perfection, just put Jesus in there. According, of course, to our various and sundry ideas of what will get us by. That is the problem with step 6. And a lot of folks get through this and they kind of get sober, if you would, and they're done. But they're not done. Because what they don't realize is those little things, those middle things, those little things is what feeds the big thing. We know from different resources that one of the primary resources that they got these 12 principles from was the book of James. So if you have a Bible, you can open up. There'll be a few verses that come up on the screen, the key ones. Also, I think it's in your handout. We're in James chapter 4. James chapter 4. And again, on the screen, it'll come up. It says, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. I actually kind of want to back this up. And I think it's page 855 in the Bible in front of you, if you have a Bible in front of you, one of ours. Otherwise, I'm in James chapter 1. James is writing a letter. This is the head of the Church of Jerusalem. To the Christians abroad that were spread because Jerusalem, the Christians got persecuted, and so they went all over. So he's writing them a letter. And this is what he says in this part of the letter. He says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? What he's saying is this: hey, how come you haven't reined it in yet? I'll tell you why you haven't reined it in. Because you still got natural desires. Desires to do things your way. He says, you want something, but you don't get it. You kill and you covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight. And then listen to this. You do not have because you do not ask God. In other words, you're trying to get it yourself. You're not leaning on God. But then he says in verse 3, when you ask, you do not receive. Why isn't God answering my prayers? This is what he says. Because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. In other words, you're not asking for God to bless you so you can bless others. You're asking simply so you can have a nice, comfortable American life. I don't answer those kind of prayers. And then it's in the midst of this, he says, then submit yourselves to God. He says, this is the decision I want you to make. Submit yourself to God. Flee from the devil. And this is contextually means not only flee from the tempter, but flee from those desires within you. Now, this is the key that I want you to see. What he says the result will be. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Do you see that the reason he wants them isn't so, hey, then God won't send you to hell. It's not what he says. He doesn't say, and then you'll be able to take communion. Or then you'll be able to, no, he says, he brings it back to when you do this, you will end up having a close relationship with God. Because you know what? That's the issue. That's the issue, is this separation from God. And what separates you and God is you. Is your selfish desires, is my selfish desires, is the little things that we don't want to let go of. It's us. And when we do that, God will come near to us. And also, it says resist the devil. In other words, this isn't perfection. It's a process. It's a willingness. And God will come near to you. You may want to mark that because we're going to be back in James there shortly. 12:12 says this, if we ask, God will certainly forgive our derelictions. But in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. He'll forgive us if we ask. But we have a part to play in this, is what it's saying. That is something we're supposed to do willingly, to work toward ourselves. He asks only that we try as best as we know how to make progress in the building of character. Again, this isn't, hey, God will forgive you if you get it right. No, it's God he's already done for you what you cannot do for yourself. That's why Jesus ended up on the cross. He paid a penalty. He paid the penalty. That's not the issue. Right? All he wants now is us to relax in that penalty. We're good with him no matter where we're at, but he doesn't mean he wants us to just cross our arms and sit where we're at. He wants us to grow. He wants us to pursue. He wants us to try. And when we try, it says, he'll meet us. Now, this leads us then to step 7. Once we become willing, all right, I'm willing to have God do in me what I cannot do myself, change. And in some cases, I'm willing to help me be willing to change. Right, do you find that? Because it's a both and. So now what do? Well, step 7, you humbly ask God to remove your shortcomings. That's step 7. Humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. 12-step sponsorship says it this way. Taking the third step was a bold example of spiritual humility because it was a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. With the 7th step, we have an opportunity to put that decision into practice by asking God to do something specific for us. Remove our defects of character. By asking God humbly to do so, we are saying, thy will, not mine, be done. In the timing and the manner of their removal. In other words, not only your will be done in terms of removing character, but your will be done in terms of how you do it and how soon you do it. That's a tough one because we want it all today. I've asked him many times to remove defects from my character, and I don't know about you, but what I want is a switch. I just want to be able to go, okay, God, I'm done with this. I just want to flip the switch, and it's gone. He rarely takes me up on that. I'm going to ask him about that, but he rarely takes me up on that. It's usually more of a process. But if I'm giving myself over to his will, well, then I'm saying you know better than me. And so I have to trust that his process is better than my switch. Because it's his will, not mine. Now the key in this is humility. All right? Actually, if you read the big book, which explains the steps, This step is, both 6 and 7 are like a page. It's really, really short, right? Because the long, hard part was doing your inventory and telling someone about it. Now you're just saying, okay, I'm willing to change, and would you do it? But when they write about how this process plays out, which is what the 12 steps and the 12 traditions is about, it's a little bit longer because they realize that the key to this is humility. The key to this is humility. So this is what they say in the 12 steps and 12 traditions. He says, in all these strivings, so many of them well-intentioned, our crippling handicap had been our lack of humility. Again, I want you to remember, yes, this was a Bible study that it originated with, but he's not preaching. They're writing to a bunch of folks, some who know Jesus, some whose God at this point is a doorknob or a group. But they're writing about their experiences. This is how it works in real life. And he says, we found a crippling handicap that had been our lack of humility. We had lacked the perspective to see that character building and spiritual values had to come first, and that material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. Okay, you will not see that quote anywhere on the walls of the businesses that you work in. He goes on to say, but whenever we had to choose between character and comfort, the character building was lost in the dust of our chase after what we thought was happiness. And there's the American history right there, pretty much in a short paragraph. Right? It was started on freedom to be able to pursue God and whatnot. But the truth is, as soon as we saw all the resources and the blessings we had, it got to be about pursuing those resources rather than letting God do in us what he had to do in us. Right up to today. Right up to the guy standing in front of you. I'm not preaching at you. I just want you to share in my misery, all right? Or my challenge, or in what God's doing in me. The basic ingredient of humility, this is how it defines humility. The basic ingredient of all humility is a desire to seek and do God's will. Don't you find that interesting that with all the religions and of all the different people groups and that go through this program, that it says that the key to this is humility, and that they define humility by seeking and doing God's will? Because to me, this is where it breaks down. If your God is a doorknob, you're stuck, because a doorknob has no will. Quite frankly, even if your God is the group, to seek and do the will of the group, that one of the reasons you're where you're at is because people has let you down. This really only works if there is a all-powerful and knowing huge God, but personal God that cares about you and knows the hairs on your head. That's the only way this works. In that case, you can seek him and you can do his will, not only because his will is good, but his will is benevolent. It has your best interest in mind. That is one of the critical things. Such a different thing about the cross and the resurrection is that our God created, yes, he's so powerful, so all-knowing, so all-present, right? He's big enough to handle whatever thing that you're powerless over. But on the other hand, he loved us so much that to live among us, and he knows what it is to be hungry. He knows what it is to be rejected by a friend. And the Father knows what it is to lose someone he loves. He cares about us. And so we can humbly come before him and seek and actually do his will. That is humility. Back to James chapter 4. Right after he says, right, submit and God will come near to you. It says this in verse 10. He says, humble yourselves then before the Lord. And notice this, and he will lift you up. Here's the problem. See, the key to this is this. The key to this is it says humble us. And we go, but I don't want to be on my knees. I want to be lifted up. And the interesting thing is if you get a chance to study and actually look at James chapter 4, those passages I read to you in the beginning, verses 1 through 4, what he's saying is you're trying to lift yourself up and you keep failing. And there's actually people out there, you just got to look at the news. They're successful at lifting themselves up. They are the one percenters. They have a good retirement. They're a sports star. They're a music star. And yet, they haven't reached very high. Most of them are addicted, depressed, and paying a lot of money to counselors to help fix them. Our way of lifting ourselves up doesn't work. But here's the deal. This is what God says. If you humble yourself to do my way, guess what? I will lift you up. I'm not going to leave you there. I will lift you up. But it'll be something that somebody can't take from you. You won't worry about what if my business crashes? What if the stock market and that big retirement goes away? What if people find out that though I'm phenomenal in this area, in relationships or behind the curtain, I'm broke? You don't have to worry about that anymore. You humble yourself because when God lifts you up, it's not something anyone can take away. That's the promise. He's promising a change, and it's not just the lack of that thing in your life. He's promising a change so that you don't even want to do those things anymore because you're finding so much joy and satisfaction out of his way. You're like, wow, this is what I was designed for. This is exciting stuff. I always thought this would be scary, but it's actually living. You know why it's scary? Because the enemy doesn't want you to live that way. So he whispers in our ear. He whispers in our ear. That's too hard. Nobody else is doing that. That's a good thing, but wouldn't you rather do this right now? Or in my case, wouldn't you rather just do nothing right now? But he wants to lift us up. Again, in this particular idea of lifting us up, this is the experience of those who have been through these principles. 12 by 12 says this: during this process of learning more about humility, the most profound result of all was a change in our attitude toward God. And this was true whether we had been believers or unbelievers. In other words, when they wrote this, right, they're spiritual people. Believers in what? In Jesus Christ. In his death and resurrection for the forgiveness of sins. That's what he means by believers or unbelievers. Whether we were believers or unbelievers, he said, we began to get over the idea that the higher power was sort of a bush league pinch hitter to be called upon only in an emergency. For those of you who are like that, just went whoosh, right over your head, right? So you have the San Francisco Giants, and they have their team. Somebody gets hurt. They have a minor league team in order to fill that spot. And so every once in a while, they'll bring somebody in because somebody got hurt or they need a specific thing. So they'll bring somebody in from the minor leagues just to fill that spot until the real guy gets better. And this is what he's saying. Many of us treat God that way. Life is going good, and then we hit a bump. We lost something. Oh, going to go back to church. Going to start reading my Bible. Going to go to God. But as soon as, we get past that, in this situation, that game or that series, in our situation, as soon as God lifts us up out of that, we're like, okay, back to the minor leagues, God. I'll let you know when I need you again. I know that stings, doesn't it? You can meditate on that one a while. He says, a bush league hitter, to be called upon only in an emergency. The notion that we would still live our own lives, God helping a little now and then, began to evaporate. In other words, we realized that's insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? Many of us have lived this insane life. We get involved in church, we get a little progress, right? We feel good about ourselves, and then it's like, wow, I'm not so bad anymore. I can work extra hours now. I don't have to do the Wednesday night things anymore. I just need just a little bit. And then what? Life happens again. And then what do? We come back to church. And then we leave church. Then we come back. That's insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. He says at some point we've come to the realization, it's just time to do it God's way. They go on to say this, another book, 12-Step Sponsorship, says this: whether God will remove our defects instantly or slowly, or ask us to labor mightily to remove them ourselves, is up to God. This is the hard one, because like I say, I just want to switch. We did not get to dictate the terms, conditions, or timetable by which the defects will be removed. You know what's funny to me? Or it's probably more funny to God than it is to me. But I do this all the time. I'll go to God and say, God, I'm willing to do whatever. Whatever you ask me to do. But I won't do. I'll do whatever you want me to do, God, but we got to get this taken care of now. Right? This week. I'll go to a meeting this week. Well, we're not really willing to do whatever. Right? And that's what it's pointing out. It's pointing out the insanity of that. It says being humble is being open to the will of God, however that will might be expressed. It is also recognizing that we are not able to remove these defects without God's help. They are too much for us acting alone. So when you're ready, here's the prayer. It actually says this in the big book, and this is in your notes. We say something like this: my Creator, my God, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. I want to point out really quickly here. This is the big book, How to Get Recovery. It says right in the beginning, here's the prayer that it gives for step 7. My Creator. The higher power is not a doorknob. It didn't create you, or the group, or Buddha, or it's very specific. It is the one God who created everything. Only He can do that. Only God can do that. And not only because He's God, because God, through His Son Jesus, was the only one who took care of our defects already. That's not the issue. The defects are not the issue. You know what the issue is? He wants to be with you. That's the issue. He wants to lift you up. That's the issue. Not, I'm going to strike you with a lightning bolt if you don't get it right. Because you know what? He did strike with the lightning bolt, but He struck Jesus. Now we're good with Him, but that doesn't mean He wants us to leave us there. So we admit our shortcomings, and we humbly ask Him to remove them. We humbly ask Him to remove that. Let me pray for us, and then I want to take us to a time of communion. Father, God, this is my Creator. My prayer, I mean. You are Creator. But you are also our Redeemer. And God, as much as we can, I just pray for us, dear God. Make us willing. Take the willingness that we have, both in the good and the bad. And I pray, dear God, that you remove from us every single defect of character. Start by helping us be willing to remove those, but then secondarily, remove things in your timing, in your way. Anything that stands in the way, dear God, of us knowing you, of us being with you, of us being useful to you. Grant us strength as we go about our daily thing. Open our eyes, dear God, to those things which we're holding on, which we're not willing to let go. And do for us what we cannot do ourselves. We pray this because it's always made possible through Jesus Christ, who died for our sins and rose again, that we too may be lifted up and given new life. Thank you. Change us. In Jesus' name, amen.